Welcome to Proving Grounds, the series where I go in depth into the early lives of legendary space marines. My name is Precognition, and today we look at the brutal, ice-bitten life of the youngest man to ever command a Space Wolf Great Company, the iconic Wolf Lord Ragnar Blackmane. Like all members of his chapter, Ragnar's life was linked with death, drawn from the Death World population of the home of the Space Wolves, Fenris. A Death World being a planet that's very nature fiercely resists human occupation. In the case of the Space Wolf homeworld, it travels a slow elliptical orbit around its star, causing the planet to endure seasons spanning years. In particular, savagely long winters and summers filled with near-global seismic activity. Majority of its population dwells on scattered islands, unaware of the Imperium of Man that Fenris belongs to. The human population of the Death World struggle against not just the elements, but mutant werewolves, gigantic wildlife, Yeti-like beasts, and even sea monsters of possible Tyranid origin. Facing all this with almost exclusively Iron Age technology, the folk of Fenris live barbaric and short lives, the age of 35 being not considered old, but ancient. On a somewhat secure island, Ragnar's tribe, the Thunder Fist, made their home. It was hardly bountiful and green, but by Fenrisian standards, it was safe, at least from seismic activity, having not sunk beneath the waves in decades, an oddity during the great upheavals of summer. Too young to have experienced the wars of his forefathers, and having grown up in an area relatively untroubled by raiding tribes, Ragnar spent his childhood working aboard the ship his father captained. The Thunder Fist may have been at peace, but it was not a peaceful life. The ship's frame, made from the skeleton of a great sea beast, its sail the same creature's skin. Trade was only possible by dodging mountain-sized icebergs, enduring freezing storms, and just as often, they did not trade, they hunted the monsters of the deep. Orca, whale, fish, and so much more besides. The seas of Fenris are populated with creatures of nightmare, some of which never stop growing. Yet for the Thunder Fist, the sea, this den of monstrosities, was lifeblood. It gave them fat for burning, meat for feasting, bones and skin for construction, wood being far too rare a commodity to build much with, and absolutely not something to burn. Don't mistake the Thunder Fist. They were not noble hunters, though. Like most Fenrisian tribes, they did their fair share of raiding. Even their island home had been wrested from the Grimskull tribe in a Thunder Fist invasion 20 years past. Ancient history to Ragnar. By the age of 14, Ragnar was an experienced seaman and a capable warrior. It would be a momentous year for the boy. It was the year he reached Fenrisian adulthood, the year he first kissed a girl, the year he laid eyes on a space marine. It was the year Ragnar died. For the Thunder Fist, the sailing season had ended. Their dragon ships powered by oar and sail could simply not risk the seasonal storms as the, let's call it summer, ended. The tribe did as they had always done, hunkering down on their island home, opening their full stores, and preparing for the harsh winter to come. All except for a lone dragon ship that had been tempted into braving the last storms of the season. A giant encased in strange metal armor, carrying bizarre trinkets, had come to the Thunder Fist. The man, clearly a sorcerer, identified himself as Wolf Priest Rannick Icewalker, and offered Ragnar's father a fortune if he could but ferry him to the Isles of the Iron Masters. A simple journey most of the time, but almost a death sentence now in the season of storms. Yet no brave son of Fenris could turn down the hoard of metal he offered, and a deal was struck. In truth, it was a relatively peaceful journey. The ship only had to endure one storm on its trip to the home of the almost industrial-aged Iron Masters. It was, however, the greatest storm any of the sailors had ever seen, coming close to sinking the vessel several times. Compounding matters, the great typhoon enticed a sea dragon to the surface, the enormous beast threatening to dash the dragon ship to pieces. But it was no match for Rannick's magic. He raised a large two-handed item of mystic power known as a bolt gun, with which he easily dispatched the creature, a sight that awed the young Ragnar. But it was more than just a display of violence. It was the potential knowledge the sorcerer possessed that truly excited the boy. Ragnar spent the remainder of the trip asking the Wolf Priest as many questions as he dared without annoying the stranger. Arriving at the islands of the Iron Masters, Ragnar accompanied Rannick as long as he could, amazed that the buildings here were of stone and metal, as these islands had not sunk in hundreds of years. Unbelievably stable, even by the standards of the Thunderfist tribe. The technology here far outstripped that of the tribesmen, but the water and the air stank, bearing marks of pollution Ragnar did not understand. Leaving the dark-haired boy at the entrance to a large flat-topped building, Rannick boarded a Thunderhawk gunship, leaving the once more stunned Ragnar behind as the vehicle ascended into the air. Almost as though the stranger had somehow blessed them, the return trip was entirely peaceful, with favorable winds. It was exciting. Awaiting Ragnar was his promotion to manhood, and a glorious feast to celebrate the turning of the seasons. The story of this journey would be added to the oral history of the Thunderfist's tribe. Ragnar's bravery in the face of the storm and the sea dragon, ensuring his name was now immortal. For as long as the Thunderfist lived, this tale would be retold alongside the other tales that made up the history of his tribe. Stribiorn Grimskull was shocked and appalled when the Grimskull fleet descended for vengeance. Not at the ferocity they unleashed upon the treacherous Thunderfists, nor the way his brethren stole the women for chattel or burned their homes. None of that bothered the teenaged Grimskull. What shocked Stribiorn was that the Thunderfists had no sentries posted, had not met the fleet in the ocean, and in fact were fighting quite badly. These incompetents had driven his forefathers from this island? It was galling. But older, more experienced men explained the Thunderfists must have been celebrating, holding a grand revelry on this, the anniversary of when they had invaded the island. They were ill-prepared, drunk, and sleepy. Besides, the Thunderfists had won the island through treachery and cunning anyway. What had he been expecting? Ragnar had struggled all night. The feast, the dancing and telling of tales, including his own, had all been marvelous. But he had needed fortification, alcohol, even the encouragement of the other young men. What was wrong with him? Had he turned craven? Why was it so difficult to ask Anna, a girl he had known all his life, to dance? Still, as the evening wore on, the young warrior did work up the courage, and was rewarded by a dance, and even the two of them sneaking off to be alone. It was resting in her arms later that Ragnar first realized something was wrong. Donning his clothes, he kissed Anna goodbye and absconded into the night. Arming himself with an axe, Ragnar found his village in chaos. Stribbjorn had already killed a number of the Thunderfist cowards when the Grimskulls became aware of the Choosers, the strangely armored giant men who would resurrect dead heroes to be taken to the halls of valor. Only the greatest warriors would be chosen. Slaughtering an unprepared foe was no way to win immortality. So, under the eyes of these mighty figures of legend, the Grimskulls paused, lining up and letting the Thunderfists prepare themselves. Once the enemy had readied, the Grimskulls came at them in even numbers, leaving the greater part of their force to slowly enter the battle as other Grimskulls fell. More a series of pitched duels than a battle now. It wouldn't matter anyway, outnumbering the hated Thunderfists 5-1 at this point. Victory was only a matter of time. Ragnar fought with a speed and ferocity he didn't know he possessed. Seeing the body of his father slain on the battlefield, something had broken within the young Thunderfist. Ragnar no longer feared death. Death was inevitable now. What mattered was how many of the hated Grimskulls he could drag to the afterlife with him. The invading tribe was more than happy to oblige. One after the other, Grimskulls came to him, and one after the other, Ragnar cut them down. He had already bested 5 men, most older and larger than himself, when Ragnar encountered Stribbjorn. The two Fenrisian youths had caught glimpses of each other, dominating their foes. Both were excited, knowing this would be no easy fight. They were correct. Both armed with axes, the two young men tore into each other, clashing furiously again and again. Stribbjorn larger, Ragnar faster, both men roughly as skilled. It would come down to one thing: who tired first? And on that front, there could truly only be one outcome. Ragnar had not been fighting ill-prepared drunks, but hardened Grimskull warriors. Despite his fury, exhaustion was inevitable. Stribbjorn knocked the smaller man to the ground, and another Grimskull moved to finish him. Stribbjorn roared that Ragnar was his, and the Thunderfist youth used the moment to regain his feet. Limbs heavy and aching, breath coming in short bursts, black hair sticking to his face from sweat. Ragnar slew the other Grimskull warrior and re-engaged Stribbjorn. The two teenagers clashed for a final time, the Grimskull's axe finding its way past Ragnar's guard, delivering a fatal blow to his midsection. It was over. But the Thunderfist refused to die alone. With a last burst of speed, he returned a blow of his own, digging his axe deep into Stribbjorn's chest. A killing blow of his own. Two men, brothers now, bound together in death. Wolf Priest Ranek watched the doom of the Thunderfists impartially. He cared not for the power struggles of Fenrisian tribes. He was here for something more. This battle had not produced many of the potential Space Marine aspirants he sought, but there had been two, a pair of boys who had accounted themselves well, slaying grown men with apparent ease, before finally felling each other in a furious duel. These two may just have it in them to become sons of Rus. Employing his apothecary skills and modern imperial technology, saving these two was a simple enough task. And mere hours later, after witnessing what remained of his tribe carried off as slaves, a barely wounded Ragnar walked onto a Thunderhawk gunship. With him, the Space Marines brought Stribiorn unconscious on a stretcher. Perhaps the mightiest son of the Grimskulls, right there to take revenge upon. Yet the last of the Thunderfists restrained himself. Even if the great armored men let him attack the unconscious boy, what honor was there in that? Ragnar would not disgrace himself to get revenge. When he killed Stribiorn, again, it would be eye to eye. Instead, Ragnar sat in wonder as the vehicle took to the skies, flying high above the clouds. So high, he witnessed the curvature of the world as the gunship flew north towards Fenris's only continent, a view normally reserved for the gods. Ragnar and Stribiorn were taken to the village of Rusvik, in a valley between two grand mountains. The town had inhabitants, but they were few. Instead, most who Ragnar encountered were others who had been chosen. Aspirants. Dozens of them. This gaggle of boys were grouped together into teams of 5, packs. The master of aspirants, a space marine called Sergeant Harkon, would then spend months pitting the juvenile packs against each other, but more so against him and the very world around them. They were forced into an exhaustive training regime, running up mountains, climbing cliffs, fighting each other, drilling combat forms. The boys were even expected to provide their own food, and frequently packs would be sent into the wilderness beyond Rusvik to hunt the enormous beasts of the forest. By some cruel twist of fate, or more likely, a vindictive test by the Space Wolves, Ragnar and Stribiorn were placed in the same pack, and spent the months of training snapping at each other, their hatred and rivalry only deepening. But here, under the eyes of the Space Marines, personal grudges were less important than simply surviving, and killing off your own packmates, no matter how much you hated them, was not a good way to survive. It was on a hunting trip that the first of Ragnar's pack fell. By this point, almost half the boys had perished during one exercise or another, or simply walked out into the snow, unable to take the constant pressure, the minuscule sleep schedule, and unreliable rations. But not the packs Stribiorn and Ragnar shared. It had held strong. The 5 boys had made a shelter and campfire out in the snowy woods. They took watches in shifts, a system that was only as strong as the boy awake. So, it was by a mere stroke of luck that Ragnar awoke to notice the lake-dwelling troll creeping through the woods towards the camp. The predatory beast was larger by far than even their Space Marine trainers. Screaming an alert, Ragnar engaged the creature with spear and shield, quickly joined by the other boys. It was a desperate fight. No matter what wounds the pack inflicted, the troll would regenerate them within moments. Fortunately, the youngest of their number, a boy of only 11, had had dealings with trolls before. He informed the rest they could hurt it with fire. Sage advice, but not enough to save him this time. The creature snatching the boy up with one hand and biting his head clean off before Ragnar and the others could drive it away with the flame. Seeing the troll flee into the night, the boys regretted not hunting it down for revenge, but it was simply beyond them. The semi-aquatic creature would flee into a nearby lake, and their only method of hurting it would become useless. Trudging home, the pack would survive, but it would not forget. The 4 remaining members of Ragnar's pack were eventually brought before Sergeant Harkon. They had grown strong in the months of training. The boy they lost to the troll, their only casualty. These boys were worthy of attempting to cross the Gate of Mordkai. Should they survive the crossing, they would belong to the wolves forevermore. Here it was, what the boys had been struggling for, the chance to ascend the realm of the gods, to stride the world clad in mystic mechanical armor, immortal, near invincible, to know the secrets of the universe, denied the people of Fenris. Unbeknownst to the aspirants, the Gate of Mordkai was in fact a psychic test administered by the ancient rune priests of the Space Wolf chapter. A deep and brutal probing of the mind, something many aspirants did not survive. The pack was taken to the Fang, the largest mountain on Fenris, the site of the Space Wolf Fortress Monastery. There the tests began, passing through an enormous dark gateway, the supposed Gate of Mordkai. Each boy was in fact put into a deep psychically induced sleep. Their bodies moved, while their minds were tested. Ragnar witnessed dark futures, insurmountable odds, alien hordes, and demonic offerings. None came close to shaking his conviction bar one. The chance to kill Stribbjorn, the chance to kill all of the Grimskulls, to have true and lasting revenge. The final member of the Thunderfists wavered. What warrior would turn down such a chance? These were the people that had wiped his own out, driven them to extinction. But to accept such an offer would be to turn against all people of Fenris, and that Ragnar could not do. He awoke from the testing to a stern warning. Ragnar was one of the closest anyone had ever come to failing this test, yet still living. Should he keep holding on to his hatred like this, his failure and death would be inevitable. He and the other aspirants who had succeeded in crossing the gate were gathered before Wolf Priest Ranek, who spoke to them of the time of Lehman Rus and what they were about to undergo. In most Space Marine chapters, here the aspirants would be offered the chance to turn back, to serve the chapter as humans, or return to their people wreathed in glory. No such choice is offered by the Space Wolves. It would be pointless. Not one Fenrisian had ever turned back. They would become Space Marines, or they would die. The Space Wolf apotheosis process is a little different to that of other chapters. A smaller portion of the gene seed organs are placed within the aspirant early, before continued trials. No transformation to Astartes is simple, but none are as bestial as that of the Space Wolves. The chapter needs to know if the mind of the aspirant can handle the feral rage the so-called Calyx Helix brings. Should they fail to master it, only mutation and death await. The partially transformed aspirants are herded into a prison-like complex. each given their own cell to endure the pain of their sudden changes alone, only interacting with each other when fits of rage overtake the boys, or when it was time to compete for the raw meat dumped into the feeding pit from above. For Ragnar, the days passed in a blur, sometimes thinking as a man does, aware of the changes in his body, other times little more than a beast fighting for food and dominance. Back and forth the two Ragnars battled, the beast, the man. Neither seemed to be able to gain dominance, and the struggle felt like it was driving him mad. Still, day by day, the haze cleared, his body strengthened, his senses improved. There was but one thing holding Ragnar back. Stribbjorn still lived. Something the beast inside him raged against. How could he let his rival live? The chance to set it right came on a day when Ragnar's hunger had reached new heights. His transforming body craved meat with a desperation that even quieted the rage inside him. Heading to the feeding pits, hoping the Space Wolves had deigned to feed their captives today. The moment he did, a bestial Stribbjorn attacked him, leaping forward, screeching that the meat was his. The beast inside Ragnar truly awoke, his fury and his hunger combining. He could kill Stribbjorn here and now, rend his flesh with the talon-like nails that had grown on his fingers, and feast upon his corpse till he was sated. No, that was not the Fenrisian way. Eating the flesh of another man was the ultimate taboo. Head reeling, Ragnar dodged, but still caught a slash from Stribbjorn's talons across his side. Backing up, the last of the Thunderfists fought two battles at once. One against the other aspirant, the other with his own mind. A large part of him wanted to give into it still, leap forwards like Stribbjorn, and tear into each other tooth and claw. But should he give into that rage? Would he ever awaken from it? Somehow Ragnar knew the answer was no. Taking a deep breath, he instead readied himself, forcing his clawed hands into fists, taking on the balanced stance he had drilled over months. When the other aspirant surged forward again, Ragnar met him as a man would, striking him on the chin with a closed fist, avoiding the savage but unthinking attacks. Again and again he struck, until Stribbjorn fell unconscious. Ragnar looked down at his fallen foe, the target of his hatred. The man the Space Wolves had told him would be his brother. Letting out a noise of frustration, Ragnar turned away. Instead of finishing Stribbjorn, he helped himself to some fresh water and a few scraps of meat still in the pit. He had made his choice. Ragnar was a man, and would remain so. He may draw upon the gifts of a beast, but they would enhance him, not define him. Only one test remained. Each of the aspirants that had not succumbed to madness would be dropped by Thunderhawk alone on the mountain range surrounding the Fang. With nothing but an insulated tunic and a dagger, the partially transformed Space Marines would have to find their way back alone. This may be the last time Ragnar saw his pack. The boys he had gotten to know so well over these months, even the ones he hated. Kjell, Stribbjorn, Sven. They would meet again as Space Wolves, or they would not meet at all. Weeks passed as Ragnar stalked through the mountains, storms assaulting him, wolves attacking him, the cold seeping his newly acquired strength. But day by day, moment by moment, Ragnar survived the wilderness.
He had been taught much in Rusvik, and he employed those skills now. Were it not for his overwhelming desire to learn the secrets of the Space Wolves and the universe, Ragnar may have chosen to live out the rest of his days in that wilderness. Men did,